So this is part 2 of the Unit 5 test review. I'm going to start with number 13. Paige has $14 for lunch. Her meal costs $12.20. She wants to leave a 20% tip. Does she have enough money? All right, so to find the tip, I'm taking the percent of the cost of her meal. So I want to change this to a decimal. I can use the shortcut for this one. Now you can still use the proportion if you want to. But this just kind of saves you a little time. So this becomes 0.20, and then I'm multiplying that times the cost. So 12.20 times 0.20. If I want to drop those zeros, I can do that. It'll save me a little bit also. If I don't, then I'm going to start with a row of zeros, start the second row with a 0. 2 times 0 is 0, 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 2 is 4, 2 times 1 is 2. Add those up, 0, 0, 4, 4, and 2. There are 1, 2, 3, 4 decimal places, so that's going to go right here. This is money again, so this is $2.44. That's the tip. And I want to know if she has enough money. So tip is something I'm going to add to the cost of her meal to see what she needs to pay for everything. So if I add these up, I get 4, 6, bring down your decimal, 4, and 1. So it's going to cost her $14.64 with the tip. If she only has $14, then no, she's not going to have enough money to leave that big of a tip. All right, on 14, it says Snowflake High School's winter sports teams won 85% of their games last season. If the teams played 60 games, how many games did the team lose? So again, maybe this one's not as obvious like what you're finding. So you could set up a proportion on this one if you wanted to. There's a couple ways to do this. I know they won 85%, so I could do 85 over 100. And then decide they played 60 games. I want to know how many they lost, but maybe if I find out how many they won first, I could do it that way. So 60 would be the number of games they played. That's a whole. So I'm actually solving for the part. Since I'm solving for the part, I could use the shortcut if I wanted to. But since I've already set this up as a proportion, I'm going to do it that way. So 85 times 60. And multiply by 0, then start with a 0. 6 times 5 is 30. 6 times 8 is 48, plus 3 is 51. Then I'm going to add those up. So 5,100, then I still have to divide by the 100. Okay, so it's not going to go into 5, into 51. 100 will go into 510 5 times. And when I subtract, it's going to leave me with 10. And I'm going to bring down my 0. 100 will go into 100 one time. Okay, so make sure you figure out what you found. So they won 85%. That's what we found was 85%. So they won 51 games. Okay, but the question is, how many did they lose? So if they played 60, then I just need to subtract 60 minus 51. That's going to give me 9 games that they lost. Okay, another way to do this is to find the percent they lost. So if they won 85%, I know that the total would be 100%. So I could do it this way. I could do 100 minus 85. And that would tell me they lost 15%. So I could also do the same problem, only we're using 15 instead of the 85. And then I don't have to subtract at the end because I would find directly the amount lost. 15, Paul bought a pair of jeans for $76. The next week, he noticed that the price for the same pair of jeans was now $59. Find the percent of change, round to the nearest whole percent. All right, so percent of change, we use slightly different proportions. So remember, it's change over the original. And then on this side, we're still using percent over 100. Okay, so I can go ahead and start setting this up. He bought a pair of jeans for $76. They are now $59. So to find the change, that requires me to subtract. If you don't subtract to find the change, you haven't done it correctly. So I'm going to find the difference in the two costs. All right, so I have to borrow to do that. 16 minus 9 is 7. 6 minus 5 is 1. So that's the change in the price. All right, the original is is the original price. So what did the jeans start off as? So this is the older price, right? This is what it started as. And then the next week, so the week after that, it was 59. All right, so that was a different week. It came later. So 76 is the original price. That's what came first. I'm looking for the percent, and then I have the 100. So to solve this, I'm going to multiply 17 times 100. So 0, 0, 7, start with a 0, 0, 0, 1, and then I'm going to add these up. So 1,700. Then I still need to divide by 76. I can't divide into 1 or 17. 76 will go into 170 twice. So that would be 152. When I subtract, 10 minus 2 is 8, 6 minus 5 is 1, and I'm going to bring down my 0. 76 will go into 180 twice again. So that's still 152. When I subtract, 10 minus 2 is 8, 7 minus 5 is 2. I'm going to add a decimal and bring down a 0. So 76 will go into 280. If you're not sure, you could multiply. This is going to go 3 times. 3 times 6 is 18, 21, 22. All right. Really, the whole reason I'm going to out one more place is because I want to round to the nearest whole percent. So I can stop here. I just need to know if this is enough to round up. So I want to get rid of the 0.3 because the nearest whole percent is the nearest ones place. That's not enough to round up. So I would say that this is a 22% change. And then remember, you need to describe if it's an increase or decrease. So if I started with 76 and I went down to 59, that's going to be a decrease. 16 says determine the percent of change from 102 to 124. Round to the nearest whole percent if necessary. So same idea, percent of change. I'm going to start with the boxes. One of them will be the 100. I'm looking for the percent. So for this, again, don't forget, you've got to subtract to find the change. So 124 minus 102 is going to be a change of 22. That's on top here. The original, in this case, the original is whatever number comes first. So the 102 would go here. And then I'm just solving my proportion. 100 times 22, 0, 0, 2. Start with a 0 or placeholder, 0, 0, 2, and then add those up. So 2,200, but then I still have to divide by the 102. Right, so 102 does not go into 2 or 22. It goes into 220 twice. So that would be 204. When I subtract, that's going to be 16. I'm going to bring down a 0. 102 will go into 160 once. When I subtract this one, I'm going to get 58. Add a decimal because I'm rounding again to the whole percent. So I need one decimal place. 102 will go into 585 times. So that would be 510. And then I can stop here because now I'm able to round. So I want to get rid of the 0.5, but I have to decide if it rounds up the 1. Since this is 5, right? 5 or greater, I round this up. So this becomes 22% also. But because I started from 102 and went to 124, right? That went up. So this is a 22% increase. 17, Christina received a $250 paycheck from her part-time job. She spends $45 on groceries, deposits 20% into her savings account, uses 10% to buy new shoes, and spends the remaining amount to go get a pedicure. What was the amount that Christina deposited in her savings account? So I'm really only looking for what she deposited, and they told me she deposited 20%. So that's 20% of her paycheck. So that's a shortcut, right? I'm finding the percent of a number. So I can change 20% into a decimal. So I'm just moving it over 2 places. And then I would multiply that times 250. So 250 times 0.20. So 0, 0, 0. Start with a 0. 2 times 0 is 0. 2 times 5 is 10. Carry your 1. 2 times 2 is 4. Plus 1 is 5. Add them up. And I have 2 decimal places, so that would be 50. So this is money. She's depositing $50 into her savings account. 18 says Olivia made a circle graph to show how she spends her monthly allowance of $220. How much more does Olivia spend on entertainment than on food? So I see that she spends 40% on entertainment, 20% on food. So she spends, if I subtract these, 40% minus 20%, I know she spends 20% more on entertainment than on food, but how much is that? Actually, I have to find 20% of 220, right? So 220 times 0.20, I'm making that into a decimal. So that would be 0, 0, 0, start with a 0, 2 times 0, 2 times 2, and 2 times 2, add those up, 0, 0, 4, 4, 2 decimal places. That's going to give me 44. So she's going to spend $44 more on entertainment than on food. Now, My other option for doing this problem is to figure out what 40% of 220 is and what 20% of 220 is, and then subtract those numbers. But by subtracting at the beginning, I've eliminated the reason to do that, okay? 19 says that Brooks' gross wages for the year are $62,000. The federal withholding income tax amount is 7.4%. What is the amount of income tax Brooke will have to pay? So an income tax, right, is just a percent of the actual pay. So I'm finding a percent of a number. That's the shortcut. So even though this percent has a decimal, I still have to move it 2 places before I multiply. So I'm going to do 62,000 times, I'm going to add a 0, right? If this is 7.4%, and moving it 2 places puts a 0 right here. So times 0.074. That should not have been there. All right, 4 times 0, 0, 0, and 0. 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 6 is 24. Okay, start with a 0. 7 times 0, 0, and 0. 7 times 2 is 14, carry your 1. 7 times 6 is 42, plus 1 is 43. Then add these up, 0, 0, 0, 8, 8, 5, and 4. There are 1, 2, 3 decimal places. That's going to go right there. This is money. So this is telling me she's paying $4,588 in income tax. All right. Number 20, determine the simple interest earned if you invest $875 in a money market account for 4 years with an 8% interest rate. Round to the nearest cent if necessary. So for simple interest, remember you can use the formula. Interest is equal to the principal times the rate times the time. All right. The 875, that's the amount she's investing. That's your principal. The 4 years is actually the time, right? And remember that has to be in years. Okay, so that's good. And the rate is her percent of interest, her interest rate. But it's 8%, so I need to change it to a decimal, move it 2 places. So this is actually 0.08. And then if I'm finding interest, if I'm finding I, then I just multiply all these together. So 875 times 0.08 times 4. Multiplication, that's commutative, so I can do this in any order. I like the smaller numbers first. So 0.08 times 4. 8 times 4 is 32, carry 3, it's just gonna be 32. I've got 2 decimal places, so 0.32. But then I still need to multiply that times 875. So I'm going to do that next. And let's see, 2 times 5 is going to be 10. Carry 1. 2 times 7 is 14, plus 1 is 15. 2 times 8 is 16, plus 1 is 17. Start with a 0. 3 times 5 is 15. Carry 1. 3 times 7 is 21, plus 1 is 22. Carry 2. 3 times 8 is 24, plus 2 is 26. I'm going to add those up. Let's see, 1 plus 7, 8, plus 2 is 10. 1 plus 1 is 2, plus 6 is 8, and then 2. So I have 2 decimal places, so I'm going to move my decimal 2 places. That's 280, and I'm done multiplying everything, so that's telling me she's earning $280 at an 8% interest for 4 years. Is that right? Yep, I guess that's right. Okay. Seems like a lot. Hang on, let me think about this. Okay, I'll come back to it. David invested $10,000 in a savings account for preferred customers that earns a 5.5% simple interest rate. How long would it take him to earn $3,300? All right, in interest. So this time, I want to know how long it takes to make the interest of $3,300. So this is slightly different. It's still simple interest, right? They tell me that right there. So I'm still able to use this formula. I'm just not, I'm going to use the same values, all right? So the invested part, that's his principal. So that's the P, 10,000. The interest rate, that's the percent, right? 5.5%. So I'm going to change that into a decimal place. Right? Or it's got a decimal, I'm going to move it 2 places. So the rate becomes 5.5. If I move it 2 places, it becomes 0.055. And then the time is what I'm looking for this time. So I don't know how long it's going to take, but I know the interest, I want it to be 3,300. All right. So this time when I replace these values, I've got 3,300 on this side with the I. I've got 10,000 as my principal. I've got a rate of 0.055, and the time is what I'm looking for. All right, so I can multiply these two, right? So I can take care of what I can on this side. That's 0, 0, 0, 0, 5. Start with a 0, and then I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, and another 5. And I'm going to add these up: 0, 0, 0, 0, 5, 5. 1, 2, 3 decimal places. So that's 550. So now I'm looking at this. 550 times the amount of years is equal to that. Well, I can't do that. All right, so how do I figure out what I have to multiply by in order to get this? I do the opposite, right? I just divide it. So I'm going to divide 550 into 3,300. So if I do that over here, okay, it's not going to go into 333, 330. So I'm dividing into 3,300. And I'm going to say that that's 6 times. So 6 times 0, 6 times 5 is 30. Yeah, 3,300. So that tells me it takes 6 years to earn that much simple interest. Number 22, there are 6.5 cakes in the teacher's lounge. If the teachers ate 3/4 of the cakes this afternoon, how much cake did they eat? Okay, so hopefully you're picking up on this right here, 3/4 of the cakes, right? So that's a multiplication. That of means multiply. So I'm going to do 3/4 times the cakes, the number of cakes. So they have 6.5 cakes. So I'm going to multiply times 6.5. Then this is just a multiplication and fraction problem. So I need to do Texas to make this improper around the world, however you want to remember it. 3/4 times 2 times 6 is 12, plus 1 is 13 over 2. And then multiplying fractions, right? Ain't no problem. Top times the top. So 3 times 13 is 39. 4 times 2 is 8. This is improper because the top is bigger than the bottom. So I divide it. 8 won't go into 3. It'll go into 39 4 times. That's 32. When I subtract, I get 7. And then I'm going to stop because I don't want decimals. I want fractions. So that was 4 wholes. There's 7 left. That's the top out of 8, right? So 4 7/8 is the amount of cake that they ate. Okay. Number 23 says Jonathan sold 3.6 gallons of gas for $2.54 per gallon. So that's for 1 gallon. If his customer pays with a $20 bill, how much change should he give back? All right. So I know the cost of 1 gallon, but he bought more than 1 gallon. So this is a multiplication problem, right? So I'm going to do 2.54 times 3.6. So 4 times 6 is 24, carry your 2. 5 times 6 is 30, plus 2 is 32. 6 times 2 is 12, plus 3 is 15. Right, start with a 0. 3 times 4 is 12, carry your 1. 3 times 5 is 15, plus 1 is 16, carry your 1. 3 times 2 is 6, plus 1 is 7. Add all these up, and you get 9144. There are 1, 2, 3 decimal places, so $9. Okay, so because this is many, and I have 3 decimal places, right, I need to get rid of this last 4. It's not enough to round this up, so I'm just going to round to $9.14 is what he spent on the gas. Okay, but the question is the net amount of change he's going to get back. He's paying with $20, so I'm going to subtract what it cost him. So be careful, right? That's a lot of zeros. And I can't subtract 4 from 0, so I have to borrow. That makes this 10, but then I borrow, and now it's a 9. That makes this 10, but then I borrow, and now it's a 9, and that makes this 10. So 10 minus 4 is 6, 9 minus 1 is 8, 9 minus 9 is 0. Bring down the 1, bring down your decimal. So the amount of change Jonathan gets back is $10.86. 24. Mike found that he tapped his foot 54 times in 27 minutes. At this rate, and how many minutes does he tap his foot? 210 times. What is the proportion you would use to solve this problem? So at this rate is a good clue that you're going to use a proportion. You're not actually solving it, you're just finding the right proportion. So the way we did that, right, is to figure out the words we're given, like the rate we're given. So we were told that we're comparing times to minutes. So we set up our own proportion, then we can compare it to what's over here. So 54 times is on top compared to 27 minutes, that would be on bottom. And then he's tapping his foot 210 times, so times would go on top and then X on bottom. Okay, so this is one way to set up the proportion. I could also, if I switch everything, I could do minute over times, right? As long as I switch the numbers too. So I just want to make sure that one of these matches one of these. all right? So I have 54 over 27, 210 over, oh, it's that one right here. Let's just be sure. 200 over, nope, it's not that one. Nope. And 54 over 27 is right, but then they have this part in the wrong. All right, so 24 is A. And then the last question on your test review. So on your test, you will have one problem that you are allowed to use a calculator on. So you will get a separate sheet of paper for that. You'll turn in your test, and then I will give you this one problem to do with the calculator. So when you get to this question, make sure the rest of your test is already completed and you feel good about it. 25 says Michelle invested $7,000 at an interest rate of 5.2% compounded annually. What is the account balance after 9 years? Round your answer to the nearest cent if necessary. All right, so this is a compound interest formula, and it uses a different formula. So the amount that you would have is what you're solving for, and that is the principal. The way to find that is the principal times 1 plus the rate raised to the t power. All right, so P is still the principal, so that's the amount you're investing. So in this problem, the P would be $7,000. The rate, right, is still your interest rate. It's different because of the compounded part. Remember, compounded is interest on interest, so that's why this is different. I'm still going to change it to a decimal, so I'm going to move it 2 places. That becomes 0.052. 9, the T still needs to be in years, so this is 9 years, so that's okay, 9. And then I'm solving for A. I want to know how much he would have, the balance. Okay, so to plug this in, the principal is going to be out here, 7,000. Then in my parentheses, 1 plus R would be 0.052. And my exponent's going to be 9. All right, so if I do 7,000 and I add those together, that's just 1.052. raised to the 9th power. All right, so remember, when I have an exponent like that, that's 1.052 times 1.052 times 1.052. I mean, this would take forever, right? So this is why you're able to use a calculator. So you could probably use any type of calculator as long as it has an exponent button. So what you're looking for in this calculator right here, I'm looking for something like y to the x. It could be x to the y, something like that. So the way you do this is you type in the base first, the 1.052. You hit that exponent button, and then you tell it what the exponent's going to be. So in this case, 9, which gives me this super long number, right? But so I don't have to write it down. I just need to keep going, right? So after I do that, I need to multiply it by 7,000. So if you just hit multiply and then 7,000, it knows to keep that number that was in there before and then multiply. So I get the super long number, 11,046.88158. But because this is money, I'm going to round to the nearest cent, right? So I'm going to get rid of what comes after that 8, right? But I need to know if this is enough to round up. So I'm looking at the 1. That's not 5 or more, so I can just get rid of it. So this becomes $11,046.88. So this is not the interest he earns. This is the amount, including the principal and the interest, right? So compounded is interest paid on interest, and so typically it'll go up a lot faster than your simple interest. Okay, so that's the test review. Make sure you study, and I will see you in class tomorrow.